Hello, my name is Thamara Faustine, and I'm going to present you a brief explanation about the 21st century which occurred in 2000 until now. So let's get started. So what happens in 2000? First, the defining event of the first part of the 21st century was the attack on American targets, including the Twin Towers in New York on 11 September 2001. The attacks had a huge impact in every sense, emotionally, culturally, politically, all over the world. Imaginative response to it went through stages of shock, grief, anger, and assimilation. Then, in 2003, Iraq War begins, and the economic crash of 2008, wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the war on terror have all contributed to create the particular atmosphere of the early years of the 21st century. Then in 2015, same-sex marriage is legalized across the 50 states in USA. Then in 2019, the first case of COVID-19 was occurred. Next is about the novels in 2000s. So, the attacks that happened immediately became a reference point for artists and writers of all kinds. This concern to make sense of fragmented and rapidly changing world is a natural function of literature. The shock and awe in the of the 1990s leads to different views of violence, to a questioning of what seemed to be have been stable, to new kinds of narrative, sometimes government-led, about threats to the very fabric of society. So, in the previous history of literature in English, writing by women was considered a part, a practice most would now consider offensive. So many of the major writers of our time happens to be women, and women just as many happen to be gay or born outside the Great Britain, or whatever else might distinguish and characterize them. And many of the major writers of the final decades of the 20th century have continued to expand their range and achievement. For example, the Ian McEwan, Martin Amis, Julian Barnes, Alan Bennett, J.K. Rowling, and Graham Swift. And these are some examples of the 21st century works. So the first is in 2000, many of Martin Amis' novels continue his bad boy image, exploring the more disreputable characters in modern day society. With Lionel Aspel, State of England, he returned to brilliant satirical, almost Dickensian form, set in dystopian town, and with a welter of Dickensian names and characters. He portrays a rotten society corrupted by crime, money, and lack of morality. Then Zadie Smith, so what did? It's about the multicultural life in London, where the mix is both Asian and Caribbean, and profoundly British too. It themes of unhappiness and displacement, lack of communication between races and between generations. Its humor and its secrets all are universal. Then, in her arrival on the scene with the Victorian lesbian classic, Tipping the Velvet in 1998, Sarah Waters has gone on to consolidate her place as one of the finest novelists of her generation. She researches deeply and gives her novels truly realist historical settings, and she has taken the chronicling of female experience to new heights. Then the genre fiction. So the crime fiction in the hands of P.D. James, Ruth Randall, and others has taken on a kind of moral role, just like the ends of justice are, after all, at the basis of the solution to crime mysteries. But these writers and the other major figures such as Paul McDermott, Stuart McBride, Ian Rankin, Peter James, and many more have expanded the range of crime novel to bring in realms of psychology, social concern, and critical polemics that have raised the genre far more the cozy kind of mysteries represented so well in the works of Agatha Christie. Ian Rankin himself said that crime fiction is going through a second golden age. It seems to me that the literary novel is actually looking back. The crime novel is dealing with illegal immigrants, pedophile drugs, and is dealing with the big moral question of good and evil. Then the thriller as a subgenre has often been where the spy novel of writers such as Le Carre are collocated. Then Christopher Brockmeyer novels divide categorization. Always subversively comic, they move from crime thriller to future fiction to gothic and back again with consummate ease. All fun and games until somebody loses an eye confirms that Brockmeyer is one of the few writers who can successfully deploy satire and comedy alongside his thriller and future fiction plots. Then the poetry since 2000. So the poetry has flourished in the early 21st century, with some poets becoming very significant public figures. Many are, of course, tuned into the changing vibe, but poetry often distances itself from the quotidian, probing the eternal values, although often from the stimulus of actual present-day events. Then many poets continue to maintain Irish tradition. Then poetry is often seen as the genre that can come closest to the true rendering of nature. For example, on the left side is Carol Ann Davy with her works Tax. This poem traces that most 21st century of activities, text messaging. Aptly, the poem is short and telegrammatic, like a text message, presented in short, clipped couplets. It's also a touching poem, marked by the quiet desperation of something lost or untenable, a quality which characterized much of Davy's greatest works, first published in Rapture in 2005. Then the drama since 2000. So the playwrights using documentary and historical evidence. Then since the turn of the millennium there has been a flourishing new drama for the theater as well as for the television and the cinema. Drama has had something of a golden age despite recession and cutbacks, and it flourished in tiny French theater as well as in the established London and provincial centers. More perhaps than poetry or the novel, drama has been able to resonate more immediately with the vibe, to give voice, verbatim and otherwise, to the urgent social concern of the new century. Then Sarah Kane is a very significant figure in the late 20th century British theatre and continues to be controversial. Her works enjoy considerable success in Europe. She has lack of humor and traditional finance that gives play theatrical longevity, but her imagery and characterization use theater in a spectacular and powerful way, which will doubtless continue to have a strong influence. Then Alan Bennett has a differently intellectual turn in some of his more recent plays, notably the immensely successful The History Boys, about a highly motivated and it has to be said highly unusual gifted group of boys studying to go to university. It became an unexpected hit in Britain and North America, and a film, its refrain passed it on, resonating with the middle-class educated audiences its values reflected. Bennett has risen above his deceptively cultic character as portrayed in his memoirs and diaries, and has written some of the most valuable dramas of our time. Then other example is from David Edgar with The Shape of Tables, and one of the most important play, which is the most important plays of the 90s. Then the prisoner dilemmas to bring out history parallels, universal themes, and recurring content of art, politics, and humanity in an era when Britain came to be involved in more wars than in any period in its history. David Edgar has been one of the most consistent, prolific, and political of dramatists from the 1970s. The themes of some of his works from the 1970s and 1980s have turned out to be of lasting resonance, and although they might have been centered around the fall of communism, the right-wing governments of Holt had and then touches of the burgeoning racism of these decades, all the deeper themes have remained relevant. And the question of the left-wing, right-wing conflict seem now to be more valid subject for drama than ever. And this is my references. And thank you for your attention. I'm sorry if I did many mistakes during the presentation or the pronunciation is wrong. I'm sorry. And have a good day.